Welcome to the Multifamily 0 to 1 online meetup, where we discuss the best strategies to get started in apartment syndication.
And so thanks everybody for joining us today. It looks like we have a full house, so we really appreciate you joining us, especially if it's your first time. So if you've never been to this meetup before, our focus here is to get started as a syndicator for tonight's edition. So how to get from 0 to 1, or if you syndicated already, how to get to your next one, how to be better at syndicating.
Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this is an educational presentation and we're not making any investment recommendation. You should always consult with your CPA and attorney for financial and legal advice.
So, my name is Marcelo Cazini. I'm here in Houston, Texas, and my background is in IT and software development. And I'm a local CCIM member here without the CCIM designation training. I'm a multifamily investor, and I also own and operate my own commercial real estate. And prior to multifamily, I was involved with single family fix and flips.
Hi, everybody. This is Claudia Rubio. I'm going to be fast because we want to hear from Tom. So I am an architect. I was born in Colombia, South America, and my background comes from managing my own assets since I was 19 years old. I love real estate. I've loved it since I was a kid. So that's why we are doing multifamily now in Houston.
And I'm Martin. I'm an IT security consultant. I've been doing this for around 25, 26 years. My business background is basically on my own consulting firm for a long time in Colombia, and now here in the US, I still work in IT security. In the multifamily space, we've been around 3 years. We are close to finishing our second deal probably next week, where we will be around 1,200 units passive and GP combined, and we have syndicated around 500 units here in Houston. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks, Martin. Tom, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Oh, and you're muted.
I think you're muted.
Can you unmute yourself, Tom?
He was trying to figure out which guitar to play while he was doing.
I don't know how that got muted. I didn't even click anything. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was with, for those of you that are local, DFW, Carrollton Fire Rescue, for 22, 23 years, and started looking for something to do on my off days, and was kind of intrigued by real estate. And I went to a real estate expo where I met Brad Sumrock, and he was just doing a breakout session during one of the hour-long periods where there was nothing I could find I was really interested in. I was going to do either all single family, either notes, flipping, buy and hold, wholesaling, something like that. And I saw this thing about apartments, and I thought, man, that's for billionaires, and I don't have any business in that. So I sat in on the session, got intrigued, spent several months trying to shoot holes in the process, and why, if this really worked, why was this guy not out doing it instead of teaching people? And all these thoughts a lot of you probably had. And ended up joining his group, met a lot of people just like me that had no experience in real estate. And that was March of 2013. And so by the end of that year, I had a small 32 unit under contract. And that was my first real estate deal ever, single or multifamily, and raised all the money in Brad's group. And then we sold that a couple of years later, did another small one, sold that a couple of years later, and just kept going. And then fast forward to now, I should have pulled this up in front of me, but you've got it. I've done 8 syndications myself. And I'm a bit of a slow learner. There's a lot of people that have done a lot more than me and a lot quicker, but since 2013, the deals I did were 32, 78, this is unit count, 32, 78, 106, 154, 238, 60, and then 216, and then yesterday we closed on a 322 unit. So that's I kind of was a gradual climber. And then along the way, I became a coach for Brad's group, and then a buyer's agent for people also. So And then I retired. It got to be too much to do all this at once. So I retired from the fire department in 2019 and do this full time now.
Yeah, well, Tom, we would like to know what is it that attracts you the most from multifamily, and why did you choose multifamily?
Yeah, so when I was looking at all the single family stuff, I listened to all the podcasts and read books and all that stuff. And so I had a pretty decent idea of the money that you could make doing it. And then when I learned about apartments and how they're valued, and more specifically syndications, and how the sponsors get a share, of everybody else's investment, it was really clear that was the way to go. And then after talking to a lot of people that had done it successfully, it just, it was a no-brainer for me. And it was, it's a lot of work to find deals and to, keep them running right. But compared to single family, there's just been so many people that came into this group that are very successful single family investors. And I just met a ton of them that said, we're not getting where we want quick enough, and they would move to multifamily. So it was pretty clear.
Awesome. So Tom, we have like a pattern that we see with everyone that we have invited as a guest. Everyone speaks about education being the first step. How do you address that? Did you join a mentoring group? Did you listen to podcasts, books? What kind of things did you do at that time to get educated and feel comfortable going for the first one?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is it's a lot of you probably know what biggerpockets.com is. It's a real estate online forum. Mm-hmm. And I was just spending hours and hours trying to learn on there. And I kept seeing people saying, hey, just buy a single family house, try and flip it. You're going to lose money. Consider it your education. And I go, okay, I can kind of see the value of that. But if you buy an apartment complex and you screw it up, you can bankrupt yourself. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get burned, a lot of ways. And so I think education is critical. Yes, you can do it yourself. You can go do it 2 and a 4 and a 16 and a whatever. But at this point, I've seen and helped a lot of people buy, 100+ unit apartment complexes as their first real estate deal ever. But to me, the education was like, there's no way I would do it without it. I mean, the learning curve would be just so slow, and you can speed that up dramatically. So yes, I did join. I joined one group initially and kind of quickly realized that there was another one that was better. And then I ended up joining Brad Sumrock's group in 2013. And for me personally, I didn't have a big network of potential investors, which I do have in Brad's group. So it was a big one-stop shop for everything. So yeah, the education is, at least for me, it was an absolute must, or I would not be doing this. There's just no, especially with other people's money. I mean, I was stressing about paying the fee for that initially. And my wife knew I was really concerned about using other people's money. And she said, why don't you look at it as an insurance policy? You buy insurance on everything else. So, the education to me was just an extra layer of protection for me and everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. So additional to the mentorship, and we're part of the Sunrocks group, so we know what kind of like the webinars and all that foundation that we learned from that group. Outside of that, did you complement that education with anything else, or was that enough for you?
Boy, did I ever. I am an over researcher. So I listened to every podcast I could find. I was reading all kinds of books. I was talking to people, which is great, but I overdid it, and I was taking in information from too many sources, and it was just completely what do they call it? Paralysis analysis, whatever. Mm-hmm. I was spending too much time getting too much input from, I'd see one source that said apartments are too risky, we're gonna have another crash, and the next person is saying, buy all you can, and it was too much. And so I finally decided, hey, there's a couple of people that I trust and have some confidence in, and I'm just going to put my head down and go. And so, yeah, I did supplement it a lot, but it was honestly too much.
Okay. Yeah, that's also a common trend on people overanalyzing things and waiting too long to jump in the water. And
Yep.
just it's a difficult point to identify when am I ready. I'm never going to be 100% ready. When am I ready to start jumping in the water, right?
Mhm.
Okay, we have a couple questions here. So
The first one up.
yeah, that one is already answered.
Okay.
So I think Sharon was asking now. No, Jing Shea was asking, have you ever been a KP? If so, would it be a good step before becoming a co-sponsor?
Have I ever been a KP?
Yeah.
I have, yeah. So, I mean, at every deal I've done myself, I'm basically a key principal, meaning you're signing on the loan.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also did, after my 32 unit, I signed the loan for, a lot of you guys know the Staples, Bonnie and Carrie Staples.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed on as a KP to get them their first deal. And for those, if anybody doesn't know, it's the goofiest thing, but in the multifamily world, you're considered experienced if you have signed on a multifamily loan. Even if you didn't do anything, you live across the country, you are not the managing partner. But once your name is on typically an agency loan, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all of a sudden you're okay to do your own now, which is a little scary, but it's the way it is. So a lot of us do deals where we need additional KPs to meet the net worth requirements and liquidity requirements. And so there's lots of people who want to do that just for that reason, because it gets them their, they call it the Fannie Mae club card or Freddie club card. They look at you almost the same as they do the guy who was doing all the work. So that's the benefit of it.
Mhm.
So for somebody starting now, Tom, that they haven't done a deal yet, would you recommend it as the next step for them?
It's a good step, but I see a lot of people jumping into it just with, virtually no concern. There's risk. You need to really know this person. You need to know, hopefully you understand you have to understand the underwriting at that point. If you're signing I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a high net worth person and your partners are not as high net worth. You're buying a $15 million deal. You're signing a $10 million loan and something goes bad. If you're the strongest financially, these loans are joint and several, meaning they can come after everybody or anybody. And if you're the wealthy guy, they're coming after you, right? So you want to really trust these guys or gals, and you got to know that they know what they're doing and whether they're, their comfort with risk and all that stuff, because you're right there with them. Even if you're just if you sign the loan, you're on the hook for that as much as anybody. So it is a great next step, and that's how a lot of us get started. But you want to fully understand what you're doing.
Okay. So Oksana is asking, related to that, do you have any examples of something going bad in case you sign as a KP, and what would be something that could go bad for you?
I do. I've seen, my very first passive investment, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name. He was on your meetup, Mike Hardage.
Mm-hmm.
His very first deal I invested in passively. I was not a KP, but not through Mike's fault. That deal just got, it got hit directly with Hurricane Harvey. There was a fatal fire where some children died and an ensuing lawsuit. There was all these crazy things that happened. And Mike kept that deal afloat with his own money the entire time. But had he not, there probably would have been a capital call, and a lot of us investors may not have put money in because it was doing poorly. And in the end, we got our money back, which is a huge win given everything that happened. But, a deal like that, if it did go bad and you're a KP, you're probably not going to do another multifamily deal. I've also seen some people that they're not in Brad's group, but they they, either were and left and started, wanted to be more aggressive, and some of their deals are struggling. And so they're kind of on the naughty list with Fannie Mae, and so are their KPs. So yeah, you got to be, it's the way Brad teaches to underwrite deals. It's very safe. It's very conservative. And if somebody's off doing, I'm sure a lot of you guys get offerings for deals all the time. And some of them are just, wildly aggressive, and hopefully they're fine. But if not, then yeah, I've seen deals that are not cash flowing that people have lost money on. I sold a deal to somebody, and I told him, here's what I think you need to do. They were undercapitalized, I think, and they ended up losing some portion of their investors' money. So, it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could go both ways, right? If you don't choose the right partners to KP with, it could actually go against your track.
Sure, yeah. And that's not I've done probably 20, well, maybe 18 passive investments, and they've all, the very first one that I mentioned, we got our money back, but we didn't make a lot. But the rest have gone incredibly well. I mean, and I didn't have to do any work. It was the sponsors that did it all. So it's a great investment. You just got to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It all comes back to education, I think.
Yep.
I think, well, maybe there are things that you cannot foresee that might go wrong, but if you're fully educated and you understand what you're doing, you might be able to avoid those problems, and also getting to know the people, as you said, you are partnering with. We've been approached by many people lately. They want to co-GP because it's very interesting, and you hear about multifamily and it sounds like, wow, I want to do it. But there's a certain complexity, and you know it as a coach. There are so many pieces of the puzzle you need to put together, and education is the one that puts it together.
That's right.
So I think you agree with us on that part, and having the right mentor or coach or partner, I think it will help with.
Yeah, and I don't want to be doom and gloom. I personally feel like investing in multifamily is safer than the stock market, and I've gotten totally out of the stock market. So it's, a lot of these deals that went, quote, badly, people didn't even lose any money. They just maybe didn't make any, which that's not the worst outcome I've seen.
Yeah. And a follow-up on the KP questions, Susanna was asking, what have you seen in terms of expectation for liquidity and asset amount to be a KP on a deal?
To be that totally depends on the size of the deal, and then how much, I'm trying to think. I mean, if hopefully most people know if whatever loan you're getting, let's say it's a $10 million loan, the KPs cumulatively need to have a $10 million net worth. So, if somebody has, I'll just think of deals I've seen. I've seen several where, 4 or 5 guys with $2 million net worth each paired up, to meet it. And I've seen one where it was 2 who had 5 million each. And I've seen one where it was, somebody with 10 million by themselves. So it just completely depends. Yeah, it's all over the place.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and it's a combination of liquidity too, right? So there are liquidity requirements. Somebody might have high net worth and low liquidity, or vice versa, or both. It's just kind of the whole picture.
Okay. Okay. So we have more questions. So Clayton and Georgia are asking, knowing what you know today, if you had to start again from scratch, what would you do differently?
I'd go a lot faster and buy a lot more. So, whether that's applicable today, I don't know, but I was so careful about, and I still am, about, what I would buy. And, but, all of us who have been doing this for a little while will say, man, we should have bought every deal we saw. And the outlook for apartments is still very, very strong. So, but it's hard when you see, like when I started, the apartment market in Dallas, C-class stuff was like 25,000 a door.
Mm.
I saw lots of deals go for 10 or 12,000 a door that were really distressed.
Wow.
You know, and then all of a sudden they're 40 and then they're 60 and 80 and 100. And so it's really tough to see that and think, you know, man, it's still safe to buy, but we're still below a lot of markets in value. But that's the biggest. I would have absolutely done more. And the other thing is, on the first deal, I spent too much time really involved with it versus looking for additional deals. And Brad told me one day, he's like, you need to start looking for the next one. Like you're getting caught up working in your business rather than on it, as they say. So that's a big one too.
How long did you took, now that you're talking about that, how long did you take between your first one and your second one?
So I bought the first one early 2014. It was 2 years. Second one was
Wow.
2016. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And you always focused in the DFW market?
I did up until 2019. We bought a property in Athens, Georgia,
Okay, yeah.
where the University of Georgia is. And then since then we've done the one we closed yesterday and was in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
We bought one in Houston. My partners have deals in Jacksonville, Florida, and then a couple little smaller towns outside of Atlanta.
Mhm.
So we're kind of looking southeast at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good.
So one of the questions that we see here from Martin is if you could discuss your approach to deal sourcing and what kind of effort are you employing to get a steady deal flow, and who are spending the most time talking to. And I would perhaps, and I know you're a buyer broker there, so Tom, I would perhaps also answer that from a perspective of a new person
Sure.
that doesn't have all the resources that you have.
Yeah, almost. I mean, just looking at, you know, the experience I have is pretty much all in Brad's group. Almost every deal we've done is through a listed property, through a broker. You know, there is some off-market stuff. I mean, the second deal I did was off of LoopNet, which a lot of people say you'll never find deals there, which is pretty accurate. But
Mhm.
I did buy directly from a mom and pop off of LoopNet, a 78 unit property. But it's primarily listing brokers, and I think that's the most worthwhile use of people's time.
Mhm.
But it's a tricky balance. You want to get to know these people. The kind of out of sight, out of mind really applies. If you're not talking to them, they're getting calls from so many people every day that, you know, they might say, hey, what do you got? And something just came across their desk. And so they tell them about it, but they don't tell you because you didn't call them. So there's that, but you can't drive them crazy either, right? Especially as a new person. So I would say, you know, identify the markets you want to buy in, maybe a couple of them, not too many, and start connecting with those brokers. Tell them what you're looking for. And then, you know, when they have a deal listed, go tour it, even if maybe it's, you know, a little smaller than you want, maybe not if it's huge and you're not able to do that, but use it as an excuse to go meet these people. And you don't want to do it too much, because then they'll think, oh, this guy never offers. He just, you know, tours all these properties. So it's a tricky balance. You want to be, I'm learning every day how crucial these guys are, and the relationships with them. You know, I've seen people gripe at them for their pro forma marketing, like, oh, your numbers are crazy, and it's just the wrong approach. I mean, you got to be somebody that these guys want to be around. So I know I'm kind of talking out both sides of my mouth here. You can't bug them to death, but you want to connect with them. So yeah, it's just all about building relationships with those guys, and they control, you know, in any market, there's only a handful of guys that do 80 or 90% of the deals. So they are the golden goose.
Yeah. Well, there's a really good question here from Sharon. What does your ideal passive investor profile look like when you're sourcing your passive investors for your deals?
Okay. And I'm trying to look over here, but I've got my camera in a weird spot. So
No worries.
Ideal passive investor. Gosh, I've got, that's a tough one. I've got investors that are, maybe don't have a ton of net worth, and yet they're investing what they have with me, and they're awesome. I've got some really high net worth guys that are a little bit of a pain in the butt. So, it's just all over the place, but ideally it's somebody that understands the investment. They understand that our projections are projections. We're going to try and exceed anything we're showing them, but if there's a big crash in the economy or something, it can certainly affect us. And it's somebody that I don't want somebody's last dime that they're counting on me to pay their grocery bill with. So it's a lot of those things. The typical, I think on our last one we raised $16.5 million, and we did the average, it was about 75,000. So we have a lot of people that put in 50, we have a lot of people that put in 500. So it's just kind of all over the place. That's not a great answer probably, but primarily someone that really understands the investment and wants to be in it for the long haul with us and keep going from deal to deal.
Okay. We have a question from Corina, I think based on the KP questions before. Is the equity you have in a current investment property considered liquidity, or do you have to sell the property and have the money in the bank in order to be considered liquidity?
So is that, I'm assuming she means money that you've invested into a deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not liquid. No, liquidity is, it can be in like a brokerage account or something, but it's typically not retirement funds like an IRA or a solo 401. It could be in your bank account. It could be something that you can readily sell whatever it's in and turn it into cash.
I was referring to current single family investments.
Oh, okay.
And
Are you talking about like as you're going to a lender for a loan and then they're evaluating you for your liquidity?
as far as being a KP or
Okay, yeah. So
value added.
So how a lender looks at you, they probably would not consider a piece of real estate liquid, even though you could sell it, probably quickly. It's going to take you 60, 90 days. So yeah, they would, I don't think they would consider real estate to be liquid.
Along those same lines, I've asked a question of other people about private notes. So if you hold notes that you've written and lent money on, do you consider that liquid, or do you just consider that part of your net worth? Because both of the equations have to be covered.
Yep. Yeah, so I do some hard money lender, private lending or whatever. And like there's one that I put out to a house flipper, and it was supposed to come back in like 4 months. It's been a year and a half.
Wow.
So now he's paying me, 10, 12% interest every month. So that's great, but it's not liquid. So I don't have any control of when it comes back. So, but it's definitely part of your net worth.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when you said what you would do differently now, it's try to go faster. Neil is asking, what can someone do to try to go faster?
I shouldn't have said that, huh? Gosh, it's a lot of you guys know Dante, my partner in the brokerage. We talk about this all the time, and that's what kind of person is successful. And we do see some patterns. The guys that come in and just start underwriting every deal that comes out, it might be 70 units, it might be 270, 5 million or 50 million. They're just underwriting everything. They're putting all this time and energy into it, and they get burned out. I would too. Versus, so those people a lot of times don't have a lot of success. And then the other extreme is somebody looks at a deal, they work hard on it. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe they offer and don't get it, and then life gets in the way and we don't see them for a year, and then they go, oh, hey, I'm looking at this deal, that doesn't work either typically. But it's the people that they're consistently looking at deals in a kind of a relatively defined box, and they go after it and don't have unrealistic expectations. And if they don't get a deal, they don't get too emotional about it. They're just, hey, on to the next one. And that seems to be the most successful kind of path. I don't know if that's really answering the question, but to go faster, you know, it's you got to spend time learning how the business works. You got to spend time building relationships with people, and you got to look at deals.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, you can. I guess you can go faster once you've done the first. You can do the second one quicker, and then the third one. But that first one, you have to take your time.
For sure. And the first one, like they say, the first one's definitely the hardest.
Yeah,
definitely is.
And I think you mentioned earlier, sorry, Marcelo, don't look at many markets. Like if the criteria should be not too wide.
Yep.
Because then you get distracted with Phoenix and Atlanta and Florida and then Texas. It's too much. Maybe the criteria, it's important to keep it
really, yeah.
as you say, inside certain box. That will make it faster, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to that relationship building with the brokers and a management company. So if you're all over the place, you're probably not really building any quality relationships with these guys. You know, if you're looking at a deal in Phoenix, then Atlanta, then, you know, Alabama or Florida or whatever, you want to start working with someone that you can consistently talk to. And, you know, a management company also, those guys, you can't just call one out of the blue and say, hey, I need a full-blown budget on property X because I'm looking at it, and they don't have a clue who you are. You know, but if you gradually work with those people and they start realizing you're serious, you know, you're going to get a lot farther. So maybe, you know, Brad says 2 or 3 markets. I think 3 might be tough unless you have a lot of free time and the ability to go there a lot. You know, so maybe a couple is probably good.
So, so Tom, Brenda was asking, which is typically one of the questions we like to ask everybody that comes here is, can you talk us through your first deal? What were the steps that you had to take to get it? What were some difficulties that you found? And so what was the journey from getting that first deal, and how did that first deal look like?
Yeah, it was actually relatively easy to get because it was 32 units, and it was you know, everyone wanted 100 plus, and so did I. I did not want a smaller property because you typically have to self-manage those, and I didn't want any part of that. And I did see a question somebody asked me about the self-management. It was a broker that Brad was pretty close to, and he said, hey, we've got this 32 unit deal. It's already renovated. It's a, you know, just a take over and operate it sort of thing. So I thought, and it was 34,000 a door, and we kept seeing it. It was months and months and months. Nobody was buying it. And then another person in the group finally did put it under contract, and for whatever reason backed out of it later. And I started, you know, I was kind of talking to Brad about it, and I thought, you know what, it'll be that first deal. It's hard to get your first deal done. I'm going to do it. I jumped in, and we put that one under contract. It was $1.1 million, which is, you know, obviously that's a lot of money, but in the apartment world, it's not. And raised $375,000 from about 7 people in the group. And I did self-manage it, but I went to a neighboring property and approached that owner, and I had the woman that runs that property manage ours for us. So I essentially had a full-time manager on a 32 unit property and maintenance guy, but I was the management company. I paid the bills. I put together the T12, the profit and loss that we see on a lot of apartments. Had to learn the management software and all that kind of stuff, but it was a learning experience, that's for sure. But it was easy to get because, again, nobody wanted it. And we ended up doubling our investors' money in 2 years. So it turned out really well.
Is that a journey that you would do it again?
No. Well, I say that. If I did, I would do it better. I spent way too much time worrying about every little penny. Like when a unit was getting renovated, I'm over at Home Depot shopping for bathroom vanities, and is this going to be cheaper than just fixing the one we have? And I should have just had a standard procedure for our manager. Hey, if this thing needs to be replaced, replace it. Here's the item that you use, and don't stress over, a $20 difference. Mm-hmm. So, I might for the right opportunity, but my kind of model now is I don't love doing the asset management. Even with third party management, you still have to oversee them. And so I've got partners that do that, for me. Like, I don't feel like that's the best use of my time. So if I did do it again, I would bring in somebody who was eager to learn it and give them a share of the deal to do the day-to-day stuff.
And Tom, you mentioned like the example of the person starting out and getting burned out by underwriting so many deals. So what is, as you start getting more and more access to deals, I mean, the market's starting to pick up now. What is your strategy for maybe quickly look into a deal and decide, is this a deal that I need to go further? And then maybe what is your approach to underwriting deals?
Yeah, and it's different for everybody. I personally am trying to move towards nicer. I say nicer, that's not, maybe a little bit newer, 80s construction and up. But that stuff's really competitive. You're adding a lot more competition. It's harder to win them. So it's, that's a tough one to answer. But I don't, if I pull up a deal, if you start getting on these brokers lists, you'll see there's days where I'll see a dozen new deals come out all over the country, Southeast, if you get on these lists. And if it's a rough area, I just won't even look at it. If it's brand new construction, I don't look at it. If it's, a super hot area, I probably won't look at it because I know it's going to go crazy. The last one we bought that we closed yesterday, it was 70s construction, but it was a really nice area. It's on a kind of a hilly, wooded 40-acre lot with a lake, and there's $2 million homes across the water. It was just really intriguing. And, every deal I've bought, I would say when I saw it, there was something that just intrigued me about it. So if I'm, I might, if it's an area I like, I might do a quick model just based on the broker's numbers. I'll plug whatever they have in the OM right into the spreadsheet. And if it doesn't look good at that point, the brokers are obviously very aggressive in their numbers. I might not spend any more time on it. But if it's hard to say, some people like the rougher areas because you can get a better return, but you're adding risk. So it just kind of goes to your criteria again. Mm-hmm. And the size, don't be, I see a lot of relative beginners wanting to buy $20 million 80s construction deals. And it's nothing's impossible, but you're going down a tough road to try and start that way. So it's just all those things.
What are recently, again, talking about underwriting, what are some of the suggestions and some of the things you look that you feel like you can still increase revenue on a property, and what are some on the other side, what are some of the things that you look that you can decrease expenses given the current state of the market now and how properties have been traded a few times already?
Yeah, well, I'll use the one I'm selling as a good example. I've always been pretty hesitant to underwrite any of you that have looked at an OM in the last 4 years, 5 years, you'll see all this stuff that the brokers list as potential income. And I wanted that to be icing on the cake, adding washer dryers, covered parking, extend the backyards, all this stuff. Every OM you see it. And that's how people are winning deals now. If you don't underwrite that stuff, you're not going to get it. And so I'm selling one right now where we've done really well with it. The investors, I think, are going to probably get about 120% return. But we didn't do any of that stuff. It just, we bought it at a much lower basis. And I feel like the next guy can do that. So, we've talked to buyers that are going to extend out the yards. They're going to do washer dryers. They're going to do covered parking. They're going to put in, community-wide internet. All those things people are doing all over the place. So it does, it does make a lot of money for these people. As far as reducing expenses, you got to be careful about that. If you look at a deal where there's some of the expense line items that are very standard, like if you see payroll, industry norms about $12.50 a door. If you see 1,600, like the deal we just bought yesterday, their payroll was almost $1,700 a door, which is just crazy. Yeah. It's ridiculous. They had too many people. So when you see that, you can reduce it, but you don't want to get crazy and say, hey, I'm going to reduce the payroll to 800 a door, because you're going to get terrible employees, and they're not going to show up for work and all that stuff. So it's kind of a, you learn what you can reduce and what you don't want to reduce. But on the income, yeah, it's all those things are being done all over the place, and you want to make sure the market you're in can support it.
Makes sense. And so again, as a follow-up to underwriting, Anand was asking, how do you, everybody says that they underwrite conservatively.
Yes, they do.
And so how do you underwrite conservatively a deal?
To win a deal right now, in a competitive market like Dallas-Fort Worth, you can't be too conservative or you're just not going to get it. But it's a fine line between, like, let's say you go out and you shop all the comparable properties and you have a similar size unit and you think you can get $950 for it, $950 after you renovate it. I would love to underwrite that at $900 and leave that $50 as a cushion just in case we don't hit it. But that's pretty tough to win deals now. So you might have to put that $950, but so conservative is kind of relative. You might do $925, $940, something like that. But it's when you start going, okay, I'm going to just bump it up to 1,000. I'm going to put an extra $50 and hope I get it. That's where you're not being conservative. And you said I've never seen an offering that didn't say we're using conservative underwriting ever. Yep. They absolutely all say that.
Right. Tom, what has been your biggest challenge, or let me rephrase, when you were looking for your first deal, what was your biggest challenge?
Fear. Absolutely. 100%.
Fear.
Wow. Yeah, I was afraid that, these people that work really hard to make $50,000 or $100,000 were going to give it to me and I was going to lose it. So, yeah. And honestly, it's taken me a long time to come to the realization that not hitting your pro forma is not the same as losing everyone's money. I felt like if I project an 80% return in 5 years and I give you a 70%, like that almost in my head was the same as losing all their money. Right. And that's just crazy. But every deal I've done so far, and it's mostly probably timing, has like doubled or tripled people's money. And so now the fear is, oh my gosh, they're expecting that. So what if we really do give them a 70% return? But it was fear of everything, like, not knowing enough. I felt like I didn't know enough to do it. Yeah, but I would say fear for sure.
And now, with all the experience you have, what is your biggest challenge?
Getting comfortable with what, and again, not trying to take in data from too many sources, but deals are now 120,000 a door instead of 30,000 a door. Does it still make sense to buy?
Yeah,
that's my biggest fear. And I feel like it is still a good time to buy. I've heard a lot of pretty seasoned expert guys say that apartments could easily be 150,000, 180,000 a door in Dallas-Fort Worth before too long. So, or Houston or wherever. So, the demographics are good, the fundamentals are good, but that's always the big one is, what are we doing? Is this crazy? It's nobody knows, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see prices here in Houston just as crazy as Dallas. You know, we're looking at properties that are 130 per unit, 80s,
Really?
80s built. Yeah.
Wow. See, we just bought it was 1995 construction for 108. And I thought, man, in Dallas, that would have been 150, and I've heard some good sources say that Houston is a great place to be looking because the institutional buyers are gone right now. Anytime there's a shakeup, they just leave, boom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're saying, hey, a couple of years from now, there's going to be a big shortage in Houston, biggest projected rent growth, biggest projected population growth, and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're making my mouth water.
Well, you've seen, honestly, I would not have bought there if it weren't for the time I've spent with Charlie Young.
Mm-hmm.
He just made a really good, and we were surprised when we put that deal out. We had to raise $8 million, and it was a little slow. And we ran into a lot of people that just said, I'm on the fence about Houston. I don't know. And then we put out Birmingham, Alabama, and we hit $16.5 million in like 36 hours. Like, what is the, to this day, I don't understand the difference, but hopefully a lot of us are going to be wishing we bought a lot more stuff in Houston, a year or two from now.
Yeah, for sure.
So Tom, can you talk a little bit, again, from the perspective of the first timer? A lot of deals now are going to, you're seeing how competitive they are, especially as a broker. Can you talk about the best and final process, and what do you see on the deals that get selected, or the buyer group that gets selected? Why do they get selected, and how can they differentiate themselves during the best and final?
I'm laughing because I just spent all day going through the process of choosing a buyer, and it was brutal. I'm learning more about that every day. Mm-hmm. Price, obviously, terms, obviously, earnest money, but it's your track record, it's your team, it's everything. It's your lender. We did buyer interviews on the phone, and people were bringing their lenders on the call with them. I can't say too much because it's still going on right now, but my texts are blowing up, as a matter of fact. But it's just everything. I worked on a deal one time with other people in the group where I was the agent for them, and it was very competitive. 80s construction in Irving, everyone wanted to buy this deal, and in the end, it ended up being the broker just really hit it off with this guy that he picked. He just said, I really think he's going to be great to work with. I like his story. There were lots of other offers right around the same number that they could have chosen. If the brokers, again, they just they control so much of this. Yeah. If they get a bad feeling about you or a good feeling about you, it can mean a ton. But again, you got to be there with price and terms. I've seen deals where they didn't pick the top offer, they picked a lower offer because they didn't know the top guy. It depends on the seller's hot button. It might be, I'm dealing with one right now on a deal I'm looking at myself. This guy does not care about top dollar. He wants absolute certainty that somebody's not gonna delay closing, not gonna come back and retrade if they find something wrong. They are 100% committed to closing. That's his thing because he's in a 1031 exchange. So it's just all those things, but it's all that combined.
Wow.
Awesome.
Tom, when you're looking at a deal to buy, what are the deal killers? What are things that will make you stay away from it?
A rough neighborhood, probably. There's people that make really good money in those. I don't have any experience doing it. So that's one. I hate to say this because I don't want to discourage anybody, but a chiller property for me, I probably don't want to do, but I think for a beginner or a first or second or third deal, they're great because it's, it's not ideal and you need to budget for repairs and all that, but it cuts your competition way down. You're not competing with the super experienced people and institutions and all that. So, but okay, put it this way, flat roof, I don't want. Chiller, I don't want. 60s construction, I don't want. But just last year, I bought a and under 100 units. I don't want that either. So in January 2020, I bought a 1964 flat roof, 60 unit property with an old chiller. So it was the broker brought it to me, and it was a guy that inherited it from his grandfather who'd passed away, and he just didn't want to deal with it. I was the only one that got to look at it, and we bought it for $60,000 a door when stuff right down the street was selling for 85 or 90. So, but again, I brought in somebody else to do all the work. So, I wouldn't write those off, but ideally, I typically don't look at, chiller properties, but I wouldn't write them off especially if you're relatively new.
Wow, that's a great advice.
If I could just ask quickly, what about flooding or aluminum wiring or galvanized piping? Would you stay away from those?
I don't want any of those, but the deal we closed on yesterday has aluminum wiring. So again, aluminum wiring you can fix.
Right.
You just, right now it's getting kind of important to know how it was fixed, which device was used. I don't have any experience with galvanized pipe, but I've heard that it can be devastating if it goes bad. It corrodes and closes off. And if you can imagine how big a deal it is to replace the water pipes in a property, I don't even know anybody who's ever bought one that has it. So you mentioned galvanized aluminum. What else?
Flooding, which is a fairly common issue in Houston.
I probably would not buy something in a floodplain just because there's a lot of uncertainty with the insurance and how Congress is dealing with how that works. There's a lot of subsidies right now. I've seen deals where like a piece of the property is in a floodplain, so I might be okay with that, but that's, it can just be a big unknown.
Yeah, for Houston, it's just a matter of insurance. Even if it's just part of the property, as you said, they're gonna say, okay, you need insurance for these 3 buildings, which is gonna cost 5 times the other building.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay.
Yep.
I think we're getting close to our finishing time. So I would say as a wrap up question, what would be the best surprise you've had on one of your deals as a sponsor, and also what has been a really bad surprise?
Oh boy, the best surprise? Probably the one that we're selling today. It was everybody in town was looking at it. Nobody wanted to buy it. You guys, whoever was on Brad's bus tour last weekend, we went there, Oasis Springs. It just, for whatever reason, the numbers didn't work. And once we got in there, yes, the tenants were not great like we thought, because the previous owner was just stuffing anyone in there, but it was so easy to rent to new, better tenants. I don't know why those guys were doing so poorly, but it was just, we felt stupid for being so nervous about how it was going to perform. So it was a big surprise that so many people were trying to rent units that had good qualifications and at our pro forma rents. So that was a good surprise. As far as a bad surprise, maybe on that first one that they said, hey, it's fully renovated, we've done every unit. We got in there and found out that they really, and ironically, it was the same seller as Oasis Springs that we bought. I bought 2 from them. They had kind of band-aided a lot of repairs. Like it was a pier and beam, meaning it's not a concrete foundation. And we had a woman step between her toilet and the bathtub, getting into the tub, and her foot just went through the floor, and it had all new flooring, but they had just like built up a bunch of concrete or something that, just a lot of rough surprises we found in there. But again, we doubled our money, and it was a chiller, 60s, under 100 units. So but lots of rehab surprises on that one.
Wow.
And there was one question here, Tom, since we haven't really talked too much about asset management, but there was a few questions about managing the asset. If somebody doesn't have experience, would you suggest that they would have to get somebody with asset management experience on their team? What are the steps for asset management that you would
Yeah,
recommend?
not necessarily. I mean, a lot of us didn't have any experience on our first deal. You know, if you have a network of people who do have experience and they're willing to share with you, which, you know, in Brad's group, we obviously have that in, you know, times 1,000. You know, anytime you have a challenge, you can reach out to those people and just ask them like, hey, what did you do with this situation? Or how should I, you know, here's my reports, you know, our income's going down, what's going on, whatever. But no, I certainly don't think you have to have that. You know, especially if you have some time and some flexibility in your schedule where you can spend time, you know, learning it. But yeah, I don't think you, I mean, I always kind of pass it off to someone else, but that's just a personal choice. Some people love doing it.
Yeah.
All right, and maybe just a final question here that I see here. Since the Anand was asking about asset class, since the price per door between A, B, and C seems to get narrow, how do you decide what maybe should be the class that you should target for your first deal?
That is a fantastic question. I was just discussing that with someone today. You're very right. I mean, the cap rate between A and C class, especially like in Dallas Fort Worth, is there's not much difference. And so a lot of people will say, well, why would I buy a C class deal when I can almost buy a new one, you know, 2015, 2020 construction. And it's true, but you got to consider your competition. If you're brand new and you're going after a 1980s construction B class in Irving, 200 units, you've got the world descending on that thing at this point. Huge buyers who are putting up, you know, $500,000 hard. They're flying these brokers to, you know, resorts on golf trips and all this stuff. You could match their price and you don't have a chance of getting it. So, you know, yeah, maybe in that case, yes, the spread is not that much different to go to C class, but that's probably where you need to start, you know. Smaller properties, it's just kind of the pecking order, you know, or maybe you're not looking at the top markets, you're looking at secondary or tertiary markets, you know, where all those guys are not. So yeah, there's a definite narrowing, but you got to kind of know your place, so to speak.
Yep, makes sense. So with that, I want to share, I know we have a lot of new faces today, and I appreciate you guys joining us. So we always meet on the first and third Wednesday of every month. So our next meetup is going to be May 19th. And for that edition, we focus on how to get started as a passive investor. And then we're back on the first Wednesday on June 2nd. And even for the folks who are looking to be more focusing on syndicator, our syndication side, I do recommend joining the passive investor meeting, because that's where you learn what's important for a passive investor. So how can you be a better syndicator by catering to a passive investor need? So hopefully you guys who are new here will join us again, and on the third and back on the first Wednesday of every month. And Tom, I really appreciate you spending the time with us. I know
Yeah,
a couple of people was asking how maybe they can get into our investor database. So folks, take a screenshot of his email address. Tom, hopefully it's okay for them to reach out to you if they want more information about you. And was great meeting you, Tom.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Multifamily 0 to 1 Meetup. Join us live the first and third Wednesday of every month.